you'll have to share your screen. I mean, you don't have to now, but because I'll share this screen, but you'll have to do that. Right now, that's fine. Okay. All right. I feel a little bit short here. I feel like I need a stool. All right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that little stool that just pops out. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Brittany Fong, and I run the DC Tableau user group. So a little bit about what's going on with our user group. We have a different formatted TUG meeting that I'm trying to set up for our next meeting, which is going to be in March or April. It's going to be a play on a science fair. So there's actually going to be, I'm thinking, 20 or so tables or booths. And everyone will have their computer, or they can bring a monitor if they want. They can show what they're working on. Everyone who comes to the event can kind of mingle around, go to each table, see what everyone's working on, network with everyone else there. So it'll be a little bit different from what we're doing today, which is normal presentations, and there'll be way more projects to see rather than like the 3 or 4 that we have at the normal meetings. If you are interested in participating in this, you want to share a project that you have, I have a sign-up sheet out in the hall. So it says TUG Fair, just put your name and your email address on there, and then I will send out an email later letting you know the plans and how many people we have, all of that. After that, we are going to be having our, what I'm calling the TUG Annual Bash, for lack of a better name. It's going to be on Wednesday, May 9th. It is actually going to be hosted by Levelytics, which is Scott's company. And that one's going to be sort of like a late afternoon into the evening. So we're going to do a couple presentations. And then after that, there's going to be a happy hour. I'm hoping to also have some sort of entertainment, whether that's a photo booth or, I don't know, something else. We'll see. For that event, I'm also looking for sponsors. So there's also a paper out in the hall about that if you would like to sponsor the event. We also have Tableau conference coming up October 22nd to 25th in New Orleans. If you register by April 13th, then you get a $300 discount. So make sure that you do it before then if you absolutely know that you're going to attend. And last, we have our DC TUG video series. So this is something new that I'm starting. I have a camera set up in the other room. We're going to do a small break in between the presentations. And today's question is, what is your favorite Tableau feature? So you can go up to the camera and then say a little bit about what your favorite feature is. I'm going to then compile all of these together into a short little YouTube video. And then we're going to share it on social media so we can actually share with the other Tableau user groups that are around the world. All right, so a couple announcements. There is a nonprofit Tableau user group that is starting. If you want more information about that, you can come see me and I can give you the email of a contact person for that. Our website, if you haven't been there, it's www.dctug.com. It has all of the recordings from our previous meetings and announcements, anything else pertaining to the user group. I would like to congratulate Mike Cisneros and Adam McCann, who are sitting here in the front row. They were recently inducted as 2018 Tableau Zen Masters, which is a huge deal in the Tableau world. All right, so these are our speakers today. We're starting with Scott Love from Levelytics. Then we have Francois from Tableau. We're going to be having an Amazon Web Services part presentation, part panel discussion. And then Adam McCann from Deloitte will be, or I guess not really from Deloitte anymore, we'll be doing a presentation. So we're going to start off with Scott. So Scott is founder of Levelytics, which provides business intelligence services, and he has worked with Tableau for a little over 4 years.
All right, thank you, Brittany. Thanks everyone for coming to the user group today. Just quickly wanted to step through. I know we're running a little late on the start, so I'll try and get through this because I know who you guys are mostly here to see. So no worries, Adam. You're right. So just want to touch today a little bit on Mapbox, the company that my company has been partnered with, along with Tableau, and just wanted to showcase a little bit of what they do. But just to get out of the question that I'm sure all of you are asking your neighbor, who is this guy? So founded Lovelytics about 8 or 9 months ago. Originally from Indiana. Anyone from Indiana? Nice. Anyone lived in the Netherlands? No, I had a long shot. How about Purdue? No, cool. All right, so lived in the DC area for 6 years. I've been working with Tableau for a little over 4 years, and working with Mapbox for a little over 2 years. Just promise won't give you a sales pitch, just high level of the company here. So founded, as mentioned, late 2017, office in Roslyn. If anyone's looking for event space, we just moved into a new office space that has a ton of event space that we can rent for nearly free. So this was one that we did recently with the Department of Commerce and Tableau. Feel free to reach out. Happy to set up whatever I can. As I mentioned, end-to-end data services, Tableau partner, Ultrex partner, and Mapbox partner. So high-level data warehousing, Tableau data visualization, Mapbox mapping, and training. Today, I'm mostly going to focus on Mapbox. Just want to touch a little bit of kind of why I got interested in Mapbox and what dragged me into this. Was there were 2 surveys done recently, and a couple things that stood out to me. 90% of C-levels at the companies that were interviewed by Cardo said that they bring in and gather location data. The energy and transportation industries are really the ones that are most significant users, which I don't think is a surprise to many people. And 63% of the people said that they viewed location data as being critically important in their industry, which I thought was fairly high considering how many people that we've worked with that I don't think are effectively using location data when they really should be. And they also perceived it as more critical than big data, social media analytics, and the Internet of Things. And lastly, the marketing and sales team, which I think is something that we're seeing a lot now, and I'll get into later, of really having the highest level of interest. Like part because it looks nice, and marketing and sales people generally like that stuff, but also that it can be very useful. Quick, just the challenges that I think we've seen so far with companies that are trying to do effective mapping is data quality, which I think is a problem across the board. I don't think that's necessarily something specific to mapping. Extracting the data, getting it into the right format is something that I guess I didn't expect as much, but we've really run into quite a bit. Real-time data, as I'm sure a lot of you know, getting systems and ways to actually have real-time or even near real-time is a little more difficult than most companies want. But lastly, the granularity of data. I think we're starting to see, especially Mapbox I'll go into, you can go down to individual street level and really get very granular with this, where a lot of data is down to the zip code level, the state level, maybe city level. And then from there, they're doing reporting, which can be helpful in a lot of cases, but there's often times that I think there's, you can get a little bit more granular and get a lot more information out of it. So just show of hands, who's used Mapbox in the room so far? All right, perfect. 10% maybe, rough number. How about Mapbox and Tableau together? Figures. So just for those of you who aren't familiar with Mapbox, so this is from their website, location data platform for mobile and web applications. Mapbox provides building blocks to add location features like map search, navigation into any experiences you create. So the 3 highlights they always bring up: open source tools, fully customizable, and integration with Tableau. They've worked with a lot of other BI tools out there, but really what they've done with Tableau seems to be ahead of the curve and really where they obviously see the BI industry going. So just a couple things that I think are why people use Mapbox with Tableau. Satellite images, very easy to do. Large data sets, reducing your GIS team, just being that it sometimes is not as intensive as working with other large tools. The design aspect of it is definitely very important. Custom routing, directions, asset tracking, big in government, location questions, and also custom shapes, which I guess falls under the design aspect as well. So some common use cases, talking to some of the guys from the Mapbox team, just gauging where they're really seeing a lot of use cases these days with Mapbox, and more related to the BI industry, of course. So real estate, a lot of these real estate companies are using it for a couple of reasons. They're wanting to see nice 3D buildings. They can highlight, maybe a commercial real estate company in New York can highlight the buildings that they have. And then you can even go down to the individual floor level using some of their very detailed tools that they have and let's say you want to highlight each floor by price or maybe by occupancy or anything along those lines, you're actually able to get that granular, where they're able to use BI to use them as sales tools, so you can add filters in, other different features that you got. Agriculture, and I think as many people are aware, they're generally behind in the tech side of things, but there's a lot of great use cases for agriculture, especially using imagery data. Now that we're starting to see more drone imagery and things like that, you can definitely use that in agriculture. Government, I think there's 1,000 different ways that they can use it. Fitness and outdoor, something that I thought was interesting is they were able to show location data, elevation, and heart rate. So let's say you were climbing up a mountain, you're able to see clearly on a map, you're able to show the elevation, obviously by the height of the map, the location being where you are exactly located, and maybe using color to show heart rate. So at top of the mountain, I guess it's going to be red, bottom it's going to be blue, we name it that way. Sales teams able to do travel routes and really improving that efficiency. So I'll go into that a little bit later. Logistics, I think, is something that most people probably think is the first people that can be using this, being that you can do a lot of custom routing. Just want to touch on some features that I think are useful. And just to give you a little background, I come from the business side of this. I don't come from the technical side of it. I've worked on learning and going about it more, but I'm really trying to view this as someone from the business side. Why should you even be using this? Because there's always companies or individuals you can use to build these types of stuff for you. So this is an example of the satellite maps that I mentioned early on. So this is probably one of the easiest things to do. I'm sure Francois and his team have really helped integrate a lot with Mapbox to be able to add a satellite image in fairly simple. There's also a bunch of other pre-built ones, which I can show you later, but high level in selecting the pre-built style in Mapbox, obtaining that Mapbox ID and adding the maps through Maps and Background Maps. It's also a simple way to go about it through only in Tableau. But with these satellite imagery, a lot of things they saw with Hurricane Harvey, for example, Mapbox was working closely with some of their emergency teams to give relatively quickly updating satellite images to be able to show what areas were in danger, which areas were getting help, so that they could effectively bring people out and help out there. As I mentioned earlier, agriculture from a satellite standpoint or drone imagery, anything that goes along is great. Government, so governments, from what we've seen so far, is that government has this great idea of open data and they provide these huge data sets, but for a majority of the people, probably not including most of you in this room, they don't really know how to interact with that or get any feedback from it. But if you're able to start showing, hey, this neighborhood is really improving, and you can visualize that in a map, it has a lot more of an emphasis for the person seeing it instead of sending them 800,000 rows of Excel data. So customization, I can show you the interactive version of this, but a lot of companies, I mentioned, real estate, agriculture, construction, we can go into all the use cases that are there. But what Mapbox allows you to do is to customize each individual layer. So let's say you just wanted to see, you didn't want to see city names for whatever reason, you just wanted to see road names of each road. Anything, there's really as customized as you want to get. They have points of interest in there. So let's say you're looking at Las Vegas and you want to highlight all of the main casinos that are on the strip. You're able to do something along those lines. As I mentioned, you can highlight, bring attention to anything through buildings, through individual floors, whatever you'd like there. And then custom shapes, icons, branding. I think a lot of that Tableau currently offers, but then they can go a little bit further by integrating both of them. So this is what everyone really wants to see, I'll be honest. This is like, I was telling Francois before, I've done a couple user group presentations, and normally I talk about my company a little bit more. I do one slide on Mapbox and I show this, and then I get questions at the end that are only pertaining to this one individual picture. So yeah, this is using LiDAR, and this is something that Alan Walker, one of the Tableau Zen Masters, sent over to me. He's been doing a lot of these. If you Google it, he did one with DC with the White House, all sorts of crazy things that he's coming up with, but not sure what really brought him to spend time doing this, but who knows with him at all. Really, so with 3D buildings, you can bring them in directly to Tableau using background images, but you're going to get, I guess, 2.5D or whatever you want to call them. And I can show you exactly what I mean when you bring it in. But if you use JavaScript and Mapbox GL, you're actually able to bring in 3D buildings, and I can show examples of that later as well. So dynamic zoom levels is something that I think is important and underrated when a lot of these mapping solutions come out. Really what you're able to do is, as you zoom in, identify which layers you want to show up. So at 10 times zoom, you're able to see road. And it creates a very great experience for the end user, because if you have 100,000 points in one city, at the highest level, you're just going to see a bunch of dots everywhere. It really doesn't mean anything. But as you drill down, you're able to see much more granularity. You're able to really provide a guided experience for that end user to make sure he's getting the most out of what you're trying to show. So asset tracking, my fancy video inside the PowerPoint. Spent plenty of time doing that. So this is just directly from Mapbox. You can go on their website, and they have different use cases. But reducing travel time and cost with asset tracking, increasing safety, tracking speed, safety metrics, things that go along those lines, and then also real-time operational visibility. So the DC government, for example, they care where all of their cars are. They care if they're going the most efficient route, how long they're on the road. So being able to track something like this is actually saving them a ton of money. And it looks nice for anyone to work with, and it shows that they're really thinking forward. So this is something that I expect more city governments to take a look at and being able to track. And again, can be implemented into Tableau. Just need a little bit of work on the JavaScript side. So directions in the same boat, right? You have salespeople that want to know what's the fastest route to get to my individual account, or I'm looking at 6 different accounts. What's the fastest way that I should spend my entire day? You can utilize Mapbox, factors in real-time traffic, everything that you may need to really help improve that efficiency, right? You need your salespeople, if you have them out there, especially your large sales team, that could save you a ton of money. If they should be visiting account 2, 5, and 6 first instead of 1, 2, and 3, then saving you quite a bit of time there. So from a data perspective, definitely can handle large data sets. That's something that they are big on. So currently, and don't call me out for being too technical here, but from what I've learned, the maps in Tableau are rasters, right? Which are images, PNG, whatever you want to call it. Mapbox is going to use vectors, and that gives it the ability to render these large data sets quite a bit faster. So that's happy to send out any more information with that, but that's as far as we'll go. Mobile optimization. So this is something that a lot of outside salespeople, people in the field of agriculture, I think you all know the use cases for mobile optimization. But again, when you can add in a lot of these dynamic zoom levels and everything else that goes along with Mapbox, really brings up some cool features there. Animations, and I think this goes similar to asset tracking. Really great way to show changes over time, traffic patterns like we have here. But you can also show housing prices over the last 30 years in the city. And again, government, I think, can utilize this a lot to really bring attention to that open data that they're trying to share. And this, I just had to share because this is my favorite one if the video will work. Someone built New York City bouncing to music. Not sure why someone would spend the time to do that, but I enjoyed it. And it's not going to work, of course, the only one. Oh, there we go. Yeah, no idea. So just a couple examples now, just to give you an idea of what you can build in Mapbox. And starting, working with Ryan Bauman, one of the sales engineers at Mapbox. This is something that he built as a sample inside of Tableau. So you'll see he's filtering, doing everything that he wants in a typical dashboard. And then zooming in, you can actually get those 3D images, and I know it moves quick. So something that I think from a visually appealing standpoint, it's great, right? Something that a lot of people could be interested in. Sure, it definitely involves a little more work than your typical map, than your typical Tableau map. And I think oftentimes Tableau probably covers 95% of what people are trying to do. But having the ability to integrate something like Mapbox into it really is an effective way to go about it. So let's see, I pulled up quite a few other samples here. So this is just to showcase a little bit of what you can do with the custom shapes. This is something that we built out internally. So we took the open data from DC, the collisions. So you could see that, and this is just in Mapbox. This is not something in Tableau here, but so as you can see, DuPont Circle, I think this is Logan Circle, are like far and away the most crashes in DC. Kind of interesting. I guess I should have expected that, but and this is basic. So this is what, we're not signed in now, but essentially what we did is, I don't know if you can see in the kind of light on here, but where each DC bike share location is, showcasing how you can do 3D images. And then we pop this into an HTML, and you're able to go directly into Tableau Online from there and see what the dashboard would be. We didn't go through the whole process of putting this into JavaScript, but just wanted to showcase it. I had the Mapbox team share a couple with me here that are fairly interesting. So this is one that they did, I believe they built this with the San Francisco user group. Not sure if anyone was there for whatever reason. But as I zoom out, showing each neighborhood within San Francisco. And the idea of this is that you have a retail store and they want to know how fast it is to deliver to each address. So you can zoom in, you get 3D as I click twice. So grocery store being point A, if you click, of course it's not going to work when I'm trying to do it. Maybe. Supposed to be able to. Click and, oh, there we go. So the directions will automatically change based on the building that you select. And it also gave you the directions up here in the top right-hand corner. It's not interactive right now because they haven't built that out. Oop. And let's see if I can. So this is a global heat map that I believe the team here in DC had built out. The idea of this was to showcase a large data set. So I know Tableau is getting big now into the heat maps natively, so maybe not quite as useful as it's been previously. So these are two examples. So they had every address in Berlin for Deutsche Post, and where each one of these is where one of the post offices is. So you're able to click on and see what the fastest delivery route is for Deutsche Post. So as you can imagine, again, fairly large data set that they're working with here, being able to show start point, end point, driving, walking, cycling, whatever you may need. This is the one that I shared earlier. So this is the antennas for T-Mobile. So you can actually click on each individual antenna and get the metric that they're looking for there. And lastly, I think I pulled up Alan. So yes, you can see here. So very impressive type 3D visualizations that you should be able to pull directly into Tableau. I know I don't want to run too late on my time here. We good? All right, so just want to show, let's see. Got too many Tableau windows pulled open here. Yeah. So here's what I was talking about when you just pull this directly. So we didn't use any JavaScript, anything along those lines, just simply pulled in that 3D custom shade map that we had. And sorry, this is. So when you pull those in, you'll see that it created this little ring underneath the 3D images. By no means does it look spectacular, and I think that there's many better ways to do this, but for this presentation, didn't spend thousands of hours. But you're able to see each, I don't know why it's not rendered, but you're able to see once you go over it using Tableau, how many accidents are at each location. So 376 in DuPont, I think this is for, I can't remember what time frame this was, 225 Foggy Bottom, everything else that goes along with that. I can go through a bunch of demos, but maybe any questions that I can answer for you all? Yes.
I have a question about personalization of the maps.
Yeah.
For example, if you have two teams, one team can see, let's say, PII data associated with the address.
Yep.
And another team is not allowed to see it. Is there one way to create a simple map and then basically customize it on the security, Active Directory, or
so? And I'm guessing this would go through, and feel free to buzz in wherever you can. But I'm guessing what you would do in Mapbox, essentially build that background image, right, and then bring that into Tableau and use all the normal security features inside of Tableau to do that. So anything on your Tableau server, groups, users, whatever you'd like.
I remember, like, if 4 buildings in the building have a different classification, and these people can't see it, but it's the same base map.
Gotcha. So you're saying actually doing security within Mapbox then before bringing it in?
Right.
Gotcha. I don't know. I don't think that's possible on your end. I don't know. It's not your specialty.
Maybe the answer would have been yours, which
yeah.
is base map's the same. The data that you layer on top of it would be defined by your access controls.
The dynamic route data, you know how it's collected.
What was that?
For your dynamic route map.
I don't know how they collected that. I can find out for the figure out. So I'll talk to the guy who made it after the seminar. Wish I had more information for him. Any other questions on Mapbox, Tableau, DC crashes, anything exciting? Perfect. Well, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, everybody.
So next up we have Francois. He is Tableau's Chief Product Officer. He's responsible for the overall product strategy of Tableau and telling the users and everyone else about Tableau and evangelizing the tool.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
All right. So first, we're going to try to do some technology tricks and see if this works. If not, somebody will share jokes while we do this. Come on.
Bad jokes.
Bad jokes. The worse jokes, the better. It's mine unplugging now. All right. So as Brittany said, my name's Francois. I'm Tableau's Chief Product Officer. So I'm responsible for product strategy, product direction, and ultimately building the product that all of you use every day. So first off, I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. It's always great to have the community participate. And thank you to John and the Urban Institute for hosting us as well. They have an amazing mission, and it's great that they're able to share the impact of data with citizens and people all over the world. So technology is going to work. We will be lucky.
It only works if I stand here and hold it the whole time.
All right, let's plug it back in over there then. All right, apparently the moral of the story is don't buy a new Mac before your projector's updated. All right, and then last thing as we get ready for the presentation is no presentation is ever real until it exists on Twitter. So we're going to take a picture of the crowd. All right, everybody smile. Are you smiling at it? Sure. Are you sure? No, that was wrong. Hold on. Apparently, I don't know how to use a phone either. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, and 3. Boom. Picture taken. All right, so this is real. Okay, so today I want to share with you a little bit of Tableau's product strategy and how we're investing. Then I'm going to spend a little bit more time showing you one of the new products and capabilities we're delivering called Project Maestro. For those of you that were at the Tableau conference in November, you saw it in action. For the rest of you, I'll show you all the new things that have been built since then and what Maestro is all about. But since Scott was showing Mapbox, I thought I'd add one demo that Scott didn't show, which is how easy it is to bring Mapbox into Tableau. So here I am in this very beautiful, really well-designed Superstore sample. And it's using the Tableau default maps. And I think it looks great, but maybe you'd like to see a different kind of map. So to do what Scott was talking about, you just go to background maps on the top. See if you can see when I zoom. You can't see when I zoom, all right? And you can just go and change the map services. And then just say add Mapbox maps. And then you can take any of the maps that you built in Mapbox, bring that into Tableau. So what I'm going to do is choose one of the ones I built. So maybe, or one of the default ones, I should say. Maybe what I want is more of a comic feel to this Superstore. And boom, it's changed. Or maybe what I want to do is have more of a pirate ship or satellite imagery. One click, and it's automatically changed. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. This is something I do a lot when I build demos, is I just kind of start to play around with the feel of the map that I want to use. And it's literally just paste in the map ID that you have, and you're done. It's as simple as that. So just a nice little add-on to what Scott was showing earlier. All righty. So how many of you guys have been with Tableau or using Tableau for less than a year? Statistically, about a quarter. About 2 years. Okay. 5 years. Up to 5 years. All right. Anybody longer than 5 years using Tableau? Wow, quite a few. Awesome. Well, welcome. Well, whenever I talk about our strategy and what we do in product, I always like to start with our beliefs. As many of you know, when we talk about Tableau, we always say that the mission of the company is to help people see and understand data. That's what we do. All of us on the engineering team, we think about that mission every single day. How we build software, which capabilities we choose to add, and which capabilities we choose not to add. but it really comes down to a set of core design principles that we really think about every day. And the first is that we believe that the people who know the data should be able to ask questions of their data. Sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Well, historically, in the business intelligence space, that had never been the case. The software was designed for specialists. The software was designed for IT or for technical people who knew how to write SQL. Well, what we want to do is design software for anybody, regardless of their skill level, to use the data. And that could be a doctor at a hospital, a policymaker on the Hill, or a concerned citizen, worried about gun laws or earthquakes or their kids' little league scores to see whether their kids are improving. It's really about democratizing data for everyone. But as all of you know, Tableau is not a visualization tool. Yes, it does great visualizations, but it's really a tool to help you understand data. It helps you do deeper thinking. When you see a visual, it helps you understand the data, and then you ask a question, and another question, and another question. And we really want the software to just disappear and for all of the users to have a conversation with their data. So when our engineers are building the features, they think not just about how do we make the feature come alive in the software, but how do we make it so simple so you don't even think about the software, that you're thinking about your data. And there's a lot of things that we do constantly in how we design, how we build the capabilities to remove as much complexity as possible so you're staying in the flow of your data. And then lastly is analytics, it shouldn't just be for one person. Analytics can truly drive change in an organization, in our communities, when it's deployed as broadly as possible. But when you deploy broadly, well, you need to make sure that you have the appropriate security in place so that the right people have access to the right data. It has to be governed. It has to be available and scalable. And so we do a lot of things to make that kind of deployment extremely straightforward. And that's why we also do Tableau Public. Now, Tableau Public has millions of hits every week because we believe that the power of data, when it's deployed at large, can truly change the world around us. And so it drives change inside of organizations, but it also drives change in the societies that we work in, which is why we build all of this software. Now, when you think of the last, yes, I know this is an eye chart. When you think of the last 12 months, we've delivered 4 new versions of Tableau. Every quarter, there's been a new Tableau version. There's been over 130 new capabilities delivered in 12 months. These are features to help you answer new kinds of questions in your data, connect to new data like PDF. It's new features to help you stay on top of your data like data-driven alerts. It's features for the enterprise. It's features for just about everyone. But this focus that we have is really focused on you. About half of all the features that we built last year came directly from input from this community. So when you go on the ideas forum and you vote up ideas or you share a perspective, we look at that every single week. And we use that in our planning process. What should we build? Why should we build it? Now, the thing that's at the top of the list isn't always the thing that we're going to build first. There's a lot of different factors that come into play. But your feedback and your input is so critical to help us build the best software possible. So thank you for doing that. And if you haven't been to the ideas forum, definitely go to ideas.tableau.com, or maybe it's tableau.com/ideas, I always forget. And just search for ideas or submit something that you just wish Tableau would do. Because we look at that and we make sure that we evaluate that when we build software. Now, this fast pace of innovation is important, right? Because data doesn't sleep. It's always coming in, and your ideas and your questions keep growing. And so that's why now every quarter there's a version of Tableau. So when we release a version like 10.5, the week after that, or 2 weeks after, we release the beta of the next version, and roughly 90 days later, there's a version after that. So 10.5 has a bunch of features in there. Features like viz and tooltips. one of my personal favorite little features. You guys seen Visit Tooltips? You guys not know what Visit Tooltips is? Should I do a demo of Visit Tooltips? Should I just say Visit Tooltips 20 times because it's just fun to say? If you say it really fast, really, something else will come out of it. Visit Tooltips, Visit Tooltips, Visit Tooltips. All right, so I'll show that in a second. We also have a new engine in Tableau called Hyper. So Hyper is a super fast in-memory engine that gives you better performance, faster loading of data, and enables you to query billions of records of data in sub-seconds. So that's built into Tableau 10.5. And you just upgrade from whichever version you're on now, and you'll get to Hyper automatically, which is really cool. Some of you that are more technical may care about Linux. There's now a version of Tableau that runs on Linux, which is really awesome if you're going to the cloud, or if your enterprise is more of a Linux shop. We now have full Tableau on Linux. So let me show you Visit Tooltips. Super, super easy demo. So I have this beautiful map right here. Incredible, isn't it? You saw me do that. All right, and I'm gonna look at my sales by order date, and we're gonna break this down by week. Boom. And this is great. I could build a dashboard that puts the map and the line chart together, but that's not what I want. I want details on demand. I want that when I look at this point right here, I get the trend for that particular city. So how would you do that? A Visit Tooltips. Wow, I wish I had like gifts to throw around. There's something under your chair. No, all right. All right, so here's how you do it. You go to Tooltip, and guess what? Guess what you put in a tooltip? A viz. So all of your sheets are available, and you choose the sheet that you created. I'll say sheet 12, and that's it. Ooh. See, this is why it's a fun little demo. So that, I built that, as you saw, in less than a minute. But you can use this in lots of different ways to, I call it bring details on demand, but bring additional context right where the user wants it. So you don't have to shove everything in a dashboard to get it all there. You're getting it right when the person needs it. And it's really, really simple to do. There's a great page. After we released Visit Tooltips, the community built some things that were incredible. And so we collected about 20 of them. People shared tips and best practices. So definitely recommend, search for Tableau Visit Tooltips, and you'll see some of those examples. And it might inspire you for new ideas for what you might use in your own organizations. All right, so lots of features in 10.5. The other thing too that I think is actually kind of neat in 10.5 is we added this feature that's called Save to Older Version. So all of you like to be ahead of everybody else. So you'll upgrade to 10.5, but maybe your agency or your company not quite ready to be there yet. Well, you can start taking advantage of the new features, then say save as 10.4 or 10.3, and then share it with your colleagues. So it's enabling you to play with the new things, but not be stuck if your colleagues are not on that same version. So nice little feature, something that I know many people really, really liked.
What happened in this image is like to back that shot?
Correct. So one thing that we try to do is we try to be as reasonable to what we can bring forward. So if I have a Visit Tooltip, 10.4 doesn't know anything about it, so I'll just ignore it. So that thing won't show up. If you're using a new feature, like a new chart type that is available, okay, that one won't show up. So there's some warnings when there's things we know won't be there. But by and large, a lot of times you have the same workbook that you had before, you opened it in the new version, press save by mistake, and swearing ensues. You call support. This saves you when that problem happens. All right. So one thing that gets really complicated is after 10.5, the next version of Tableau would logically be 10.6, logically. But instead, we decided to call it 2018.1. It was such a massive leap forward in capabilities that we had to add everything up. So
So the reason that we're changing the naming constructs of Tableau, just something for all of you to know, where now it's going to be year dot release of that year. So technically, it's the second release, but we kicked it off after 10.5. So it'll be 2018.1, then .2, then .3, then we hit 2019, then it'll be .1, .2, .3, .4. So if we're releasing 3 versions a year, it'll go to .3. We release 14 versions, it'll go through .14. This is very typical in a SaaS world where software is just automatically updated. You don't really think of the version, you just get capabilities. So we're moving in that context. And as we see more and more people in the cloud, that's the way software gets delivered. So just something for you guys to be aware of.
When is that going to
Starting in that version, 2018.1. So we're in beta for that. So in roughly, I always like to say 90 days, that'll go into effect. So again, the process is the same, but we're just gonna help people get more current in terms of the capabilities. I know, am I 3 years behind or 3 months behind?
This might be odd to ask. Is there any way to change the parameters of Reader? Because our biggest actual issue is people not wanting to update Reader. They share a file, just send it out, they can't open it, they don't do it. And so I think that's actually our biggest constraint, especially if you go to Central Place to get something upgraded. So if you know that this is our 4 releases, if you can plan for that in terms of Reader updates, so maybe they only need to update Reader once a year.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So there's 3 answers there. The first one is if you have an IT department that can help you deploy software, kind of package it up and deploy it through System Center, for instance, you could do that, right? So just say, okay, the organization's moving to 10.5. Let's get Reader on 10.5. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is we've thought about an auto-updating Reader, but there's IT policies that sometimes prevent us from doing that. So we're reluctant to only support half the community, if that's the case. And the third one is I always go back to, well, why do you need Reader? And I'm not saying Reader is bad, just why do you need Reader? If it's about sharing distribution, maybe there's some better ways of solving that problem. And so there's some things there that we might be able to help you with, especially later on this year. So kind of a non-answer to a question, but definitely something that we can improve on. Yes, please.
saw that 10.5 last week, so that would be a 10.5 that this comes out? Or?
Yes. Okay, so just as a reminder for everyone, every release has a 30-month support policy. So when I release 10.5, you'll see 10.5.1, 10.5.2, and those are just bug fixes. There are no features in there at all. It's just fixing problems that people encounter in the field. That keeps going for about 30 months. And it slows down because we get less bugs or less bugs reported later on. And then we'll start 2018.1, and there'll be a 2018.1.1. And at that same time, there'll probably be a 10.5.4. We actually have about 8 to 10 versions that we support at the same time. So lots of good things in here. And all of that together, this is a slide I like to share, which is when you think about Tableau, yes, we have Tableau Desktop, and we have Tableau Server, and we have Tableau Online. But at the end of the day, it's the collection of capabilities that are enabled in your organizations, whether it's the ability to connect to multiple different data sources, data prep, doing data governance, analytics, collaboration, being able to deploy it everywhere. This is really all the capabilities that we put into our quote-unquote platform that we make available. And so we think about the integration of what we build into this platform, not as a set of products that are independent of each other, not as a set of features that should be standalone, but really how do they all work together so that you have an integrated offering rather than a Frankenstein set of products that kind of work if you stand on one foot, right? We want to be a seamless integration that supports security and governance and compliance, yet also gives every user the flexibility to analyze data anywhere they want. So that's what we do. But there's a piece of this platform that, quite frankly, isn't solving the need today. and I'll call it the data prep side of that platform. We've been adding data prep capabilities for a while to help as you're in the flow. Oh, I've got a data problem, let me fix it right away. But sometimes you're trying to do data prep because you know you're going to be wrangling data from everywhere, and that's your task. Tableau wasn't built for that task. It was built for the task of analysis. And so we started thinking about, is there a different way of approaching this problem? And that's where Project Maestro came to be. When we started looking at the area of data prep, we saw a really familiar pattern to us. We saw tools that were complicated, designed for specialists, limited to the few, and sometimes very expensive, but that's kind of a side point. But really, they were designed for somebody else than for the typical Tableau user. That's exactly the pattern we saw 14 years ago when Tableau started. Right? 14 years ago, the tools for business intelligence and analytics were designed for PhDs in stats or IT professionals. They had the name SAS or Business Objects and Cognos. And we took a different approach, right? We thought, shouldn't the people who know the data be able to answer questions of the data? Yeah. Well, why is it that when you have a data wrangling challenge, well, that premise goes out the window? Hence Project Maestro. So what we're going to do with Project Maestro is basically do to data prep what Tableau did to business intelligence, which is to bring an easy to use, visual, and direct tool for data prep. Okay? Every operation in Maestro is visual. It's immediate. You get instant feedback, so you know exactly the impact of any change that you've done. Right? And we call it Maestro. Maestro is the code name, but as we think about orchestrating all of this data together, you're kind of a conductor, right? You're shaping all of these different instruments, which is your data, into a beautiful symphony, which is your analysis. That was the play on words that created Maestro. And so we'll see when we go through Maestro this interface, and the interface has a lot of interesting elements to it. Right here it looks complicated, but you'll see that every part of it will be visual. I always see the shape of the data. So when I bring in my data, you see the profile of the data. You can see when I highlight over it how many rows there are for that particular field. I can go in and do operations directly on the data. So if I want to keep only, if I want to filter, I don't have to go into this abstraction dialog. I just do it right away and I see that impact. And I can go back and forth between my operations to see what happens. We've tried to reinvent different things like doing a join. If you've tried to do a join, sometimes it's kind of hard. I don't know why the results are the way they are. Sometimes I get data explosion. Sometimes I don't get the data that I expected. Sometimes I get no data. And so what we tried to reinvent is a visual way of making joins more approachable. So you can see, I'll do it with my mouse so everybody can see it. So you can see what is included, what is excluded, how many results do I get, so I get more confidence. We're adding smarts into the software as well. So there's automatic algorithms to help clean your data. So I don't have to do a lot of manual tasks. Things like understanding what I'm doing, we've also made that visual. This is maybe more typical of what you'd see in a data prep tool, but we've tried to make it very intuitive for how you bring these operations together. And so far, we've had about 3,000 customers in the beta. If all of you are interested in this area, definitely encourage you to download the beta. We've had some great quotes so far. Josh Milligan from Technion said, Maestro was fun and easy. For data prep, which is probably one of the worst things that you do at work, maybe going to the dentist can be worse, but data prep being fun and easy, kind of weird. Or Jonathan Hyde, he had this daunting data prep challenge that he was just putting aside. He got it done in 25 minutes. And he would take him hours with the other mechanisms he had, which was scripting. Yes, ma'am.
So my issue is with rows versus columns. Some of my sources have the key across the top. So will this help me better than the pivot that I've got in 10.4?
Yes, it will. I'll show you an example of how to fix that. And you'll see we'll do it visual and you'll get instant feedback. You can do multiple pivots. You've got maybe survey data or different kinds of data that you want to bring together. And one of my last favorite quotes is from Gordon Strodel. He basically said, look, if you're using Excel today to do your data prep, live with that pain a little longer. Like, actually, that pain is worth it because Maestro is going to make your life a lot easier. So again, we're in beta right now, which means release will be pretty soon. All right, so let's see it. So remind me again, how many people were at the Tableau conference? So about half and half. Okay, so I wasn't sure if I was going to show you the, what have we done since the conference demo, or do the, hey, here are the basics of Maestro demo. So I think I'll do both, and I'll go quickly, and you'll get the sense. All righty. Okay, so we'll start from scratch. So Maestro is a standalone tool, right, that runs on desktop, either on Mac or on Windows, fully integrated with Tableau. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect to some data. And the data sources that we'll support in Maestro are close to this data sources we have in desktop. Probably about 75% at launch will be the same. And in this case, I'm going to connect to, I think, a text file. And let's go in here to my Maestro demo. Great. And I'm going to connect to this US Superstore text file. Now, as soon as I connect, there's some properties in here, but I'm just going to go and add a step. Let's see how the thing works out. I'll go full screen. All right, so as soon as I connect, Maestro creates 3 panes. At the top, this is what we call the flow pane. This is how the flow of your data prep process will get created dynamically. The middle is your profile pane. This shows the distribution of your data. And the bottom, you always see the data. So every single row is visible right here. So if I want to know how many products had discounts of 0%, well, I just hover over it, I can see it, I can click on it, and everything is filtered automatically. You can kind of see there's proportional brushing as well, which is seeing the distribution of that field in all the other fields. But just really, really straightforward. Now, if I want to add another data set in here, I'm going to go in and add my Superstore products. Now we have 2 different data sets. I want to join them together. I can just drag, and I can create a union or a join. Just bring that right over here. It'll automatically discover what the join clause is. It'll show you, it's tough because I can't zoom for all of you, so I apologize that it's so small. It'll show you different ways to create your joins, what's included, what's excluded. Wait, why are there some excluded rows? It gives you some of that feedback. I can go in, you can see, can you see here? These are red. So I'm colorblind, but these look a different color. And that shows that these are the excluded values. There's no match between the 2. Oh, is that a data input challenge? Is that another challenge? I can go in and change my join type right here. If I want to go in and add, different operations that you can do, I can create a pivot, which I'll show you in a few moments. So that's when I'm going to pivot columns to rows. I can do unions. I can do aggregates. So maybe I just want the summary of the data. Again, this is an example of something that we've done visually. So if I want to aggregate based on product category, boom, and number of records, just like that. Now I've created aggregations automatically. If I go back in here, I'm going to just add a step just so you can see it. And if I wanted to remove some data, I can just select it, say, this is not something I want. I'm just going to exclude it. Excluded. If I want to remove a column, I can just go in and say, just remove that field. If I want to add a calculation, I can just go and say, either create a split, or maybe I want to just create a new kind of calculation. Like I'm going to go to profit, say create calculate fields. And if you've used Tableau's calculation engine, it's the same one as here. So if you know how to create a calc in Tableau, you know how to create a calc in Maestro. Okay. So really, really straightforward. And then the output can be a Tableau file, a Hyper file, a TDE, if you have an older version, or a CSV. You can also publish it to Tableau server, so you can have well-curated, governed sources as well. So those are the basic steps that you have in Maestro. I'm going to go a little bit higher end now and show you this additional data set. So here we're going to bring, this is policing data for schools across a couple states. So we have these 3 different data sets that we're going to do some operations on. As you can see, over each little node, there's these little fields right here that tell you that some operations have been done here. There's actually 30 changes that were done here, and I get a recipe for every single change that's been done. So I can go see exactly what happened at that step and why the data changed the way it was. But there's a reason we do it this way. And I'll go technical for a second, is that we try to reason on the operations. Because sometimes what I can do to be efficient is push that computation to the backend database. So instead of extracting the data, computing it locally, then moving it somewhere else, we're going to say, oh, actually, these operations, I can just construct it in a SQL statement, send it to the back end, and only get 10 results back instead of bringing everything back. So we try to be more efficient and smart as we build these things together. So here, I've done a union of these various data sets. You can see how that data comes together. And I have my clean union right here. But there's some operations I'd like to do on this data. For instance, let me see here. I'm going to just change this to details so we can see everything in here. You know, I have data for multiple years. So I go from 2010 all the way to, you can see on the right-hand side, that distribution that shows up, 2010 all the way to 2016. I really only want a couple years of data, so I want to filter this data together. Well, what we've done is we brought the filter dialog from Tableau Desktop into Maestro. So all I need to do is say filter. I'm going to make it a relative date filter, just like in Tableau. And then you get this little window that shows up and say, I'd like the last 3 years of data. Boom, filtered. That easy. Right? I'm staying in the flow. I can experiment. If I wanted more, I can say last 4 years, 6 years, just really, really straightforward. All right, so now we've filtered some data, which is easy to do. But let's see some other standard data prep challenges that we face. Notice what's going on right here with vehicle type. There's some weird spacing going on. I've got some numbers in there, different spellings of the same thing. Pretty typical. We see that in data sets all the time. So how do we go about fixing it? Well, do I write a calc? Nope. With Maestro, we have all of these different operations. So I have what I call quick cleaning operations. So if I want to just say remove trim spaces, 1 click. If I want to say, let's go clean and remove punctuation, because that shouldn't be in there. I'm going to remove numbers, because there shouldn't be numbers in there. And all those operations are performed. But you'll notice that I have 2 different spellings of Honda, 2 different spellings of Mercedes. I actually have other things, Chevrolet, Chevrolet. Well, how do I fix that? Well, I could go ahead and select these 2 things and group them together if I wanted to, or rename it. So maybe Chevrolet should have been Chevrolet. So I can just fix the data this way, which is okay, but then I'd have to fix every single row, and we don't have that much time for demos, and Brittany's already giving me the sign. So we're gonna do this a little bit faster. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is do a group and replace using some smart algorithms. So we've added some algorithms in Maestro, so I can group based on pronunciation or common characters. And now I'll just say common characters, boom, and we've done our grouping. And let's see what it did. Come on, let's make this wider. Come on, mouse. All right, well, I can't seem to use my mouse with Zoom. All right, well, if you see right here, Chevrolet, it gives you feedback that there's 2 members that show up in Chevrolet. Or Honda has 2 as well. Oh, we made a mistake. Audi is really a Honda. Just so you know, it's made by the Japanese. So you can add that in, right? So you get always this feedback. So you can use the algorithms, but you always have a manual override. And there's more and more algorithms that we're going to add to the product. And again, you have all the change list of everything that was done. So if I want to see what happened when I remove punctuation, I can go back in time, and see all the data. Pretty cool? All right. So let's go do some more changes. And I'm going to do your example of how to pivot. So here I have data for violent crime. And you'll notice that it looks almost right. I have years as columns, state and cities as columns. Not exactly what I want. So I'm going to do a pivot. And if you've ever done a pivot, sometimes it's hard to kind of comprehend what's going on. So we made a visual operation. So I can just go here and say, these are the columns that I want to pivot. Move those to rows, drag, drop, problem solved. You can do multiple pivots. In this version for V1, you would just go in and say, add another pivot, and you would just chain those together. In the futures, we'll bring those together. On multiple different data sources, and then you can bring them all together and do anything you want. I can union them, I can do all of it. And again, this is a visual indicator. So if I wanted to add city in here, oh, if I made a mistake, I can go remove this one. Right? Sometimes you want to pivot multiple fields in different ways. And so you can fully experiment with your data. And of course, I can go in and rename this to whatever I want. So we'll just say rename field to years, values, etc. And I can even rename the step that I have over here. So if I want to remember what I did, I'll just say pivot years. And now I want to union that together or join it over here. So I'll just say create a join. That creates my visual join. We've got it joined on states. I get my feedback to see if that's what I wanted. I can change it to anything I want, just really, really easily. And again, then I get my output. Yes?
Did you say that this will create a syntax file that with the state similar data type?
So this, the output of this, just like a Tableau output is a TWIB, TWB, which is an XML file, the output of this is a TIFL, a Tableau flow. Flow? Yeah, it's a French pronunciation. I'm sorry. C'est un Tableau flow. It's a very nice. It comes with XML built in. But the Tableau, why am I doing it in French now? The flow file is basically just an XML representation of all the operations that we're doing here. So V1 is a desktop tool, right? Which means the operational part isn't there. You'll be able to run it using Windows Task Scheduler at some point in the near future. Eventually, there'll be a server component that you can go schedule that to the server, make some operations portable, etc.
So this is awesome. I'm really glad to learn more about this. And this is what I learned at the conference. So the $20,000 question is this by Tableau or Tableau? We've got a number of customers that you've helped us to see, and they understand the data, but then they want to take it with them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, can I interest you in a lollipop chart, maybe a nice bullet chart? You can see that, but no, just the data, please, because I'm going to use it for something else. And then we get into the bursting the 16-column barrier, and the experts are looking at this for a while. I'm like, maybe you guys should think about using some of these ideas in the data export interface that would help us avoid doing all kinds of kludges, because we're like, the Tableau is not a spreadsheet. Take it away.
I second that. I mean, I've made workbooks and shown my end users, and then they're like, no, just make me a CSV that has it. So it's like, it's a nice mental Tableau exercise.
It hurts me right here.
I know.
I came to DC for the sunshine, not for the pain.
We share it.
This is a support group, right? Is that why there's coffee over there? Been sitting there for a couple days. All right, so couple of things. First, let me actually just tackle the table problem, which tables we know is not a beautiful visual, but in some cases tables are really useful. And yes, people want more than 16 columns, and they want, you know, columns that are independently sizable, and they want more flexibility. And yeah, we hear them, and we'll add that sooner rather than later. Okay? That doesn't mean that we want tables to be like the chart type for Tableau, but there's reasons to have the way tables the way people want them, and we should make that easier for them. So you'll see that those improvements coming sooner rather than later. Second thing is Maestro. Today will output to Tableau. And Tableau only, unless you consider CSV something special, because we decided that, you know, for V1, what's most important is that I can solve the business problem. And if I can solve the business problem and delight the users and get them to use Maestro on a regular basis to solve real challenges, now we'll be successful. And then we can talk about exporting to other things, right? But we can talk about it. But if I can't solve your data prep challenge, there's no point in talking about it because I haven't solved your challenge. So we always think of, how do I solve the challenge first? That's why tables, we kind of punted that for years, because the first thing was, what questions do you have? Let's solve those first. And then we start saying, okay, well, in those cases, you want the details on the men, you want this, you want that, and you may need a little bit more. So that's the approach that we take. Now, will Maestro and desktop like get more tightly integrated so that when I do an export or an input, those two things will start kind of blending together, especially as you start doing things on the web, right? Different products on the web are basically the same product. It's just Chrome or whatever browser you use. Yeah. So biggest thing I'll say, I see you. I see your hand over there. Biggest thing I'd say is use the beta, use the release when it comes out, and give us feedback. And just like we have an active community for Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server, we'll have an active community here, and we're going to be pushing and accelerating on this. And the team has been releasing every month new features. And I think they're going to keep going down that same path afterwards. Helpful? Awesome. Sweet. Yes, sir.
So, couple of questions. What's kind of the pricing on this? And considering that you is there going to be a web version, but international version, server version, because like the desktop isn't that's only.
Well, there's somebody with a Square reader out back. They'll gladly take your credit card. Whatever you want to pay, you just put in a number. We'll take any amount. Goes through my account in the Caymans, so no worries there. So we're not talking pricing or packaging today. We'll do that closer to the release. But we're working really, really closely with customers to understand what makes sense. And again, same thing for eventually you want to schedule this and operationalize it and secure it and govern it. Right? That'll be the server component. That'll be cloud or on-prem. And we'll talk about that when we get there. I think there was a question, sir, on the left.
Similar, like if you already have a license or server license.
So yeah, we'll talk packaging and pricing at a later point.
Will there be a public version of this?
We'll talk packaging and pricing at a later point. I have my talking points really like nailed. Yes, then over there, then over here.
How does this perform on live database?
So how does it perform on live databases? Actually, a really, really good question. So we do some interesting things with live databases where we will actually can I go over here? We'll actually do sampling of the data. So we can pull down a random sample. We can pull down 1,000 rows. We do a bunch of different things to help you visualize a result set without taking down your database. What we've seen is different procedures, different databases can be more aggressive in killing various queries. So we try to sample and be smart. And then you'll see when we're sampling, you'll get an indicator saying we've sampled data. So your actual results may vary. So by the way, my own testing at the office, I always do it live against a SQL Server database and a Hadoop instance, because that's the scenario that I use. And in some cases, the sample doesn't get me exactly what I want because it's excluding some of the data. So we're trying to tune that algorithm to get a much better distribution, but that's the problem with sampling.
Do you foresee it as you get into ETL space, right back to the database?
That's the output that we're talking about. So if I can solve your data prep challenges first, output right back makes sense. Yes? Right there. Yay. Thank you for making me move forward. So it's an open beta. You have to be an existing Tableau customer. So if you're not, for this small price of $70 per user per month, we can make you a Tableau customer and you can have access to the beta. Of course, it's a beta, there's bugs, but we want your feedback. We have seen customers that have been using it in production because it's a data prep flow, so it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so the plan is future centrally.
So the plan is for the future. That's right. So the question is the plan to centrally manage it through the server at some point in the future? Again, there's two kinds of users. Actually, there's multiple kinds of users, but two main kinds. There's the person who designs the flows and maybe somebody who operationalizes it, defines what the schedules are allowed to be, what resource governance is allowed, whether I have flows that are duplicative and pulling down the same data and being able to manage that centrally, apply rules centrally. So we see those two. Correct. Yeah. Security has to be core because especially as you're moving data, you've essentially removed security from the source, pushing it somewhere else. So we as Tableau, broadly speaking, we're investing in security deeply, things like encryption at rest, row-level security, centrally managed, rather than doing user filters. Yes? What data source would you like? Of what? S-base? Why? Why? So the question is this for relational only or will it support other kinds of formats? For V1, as I mentioned, we're going to have about 75% of the data sources from Tableau Desktop available in Maestro. Obviously, there's always differences between Mac and Windows. Cubes are one that will not be in V1 because cubes are special creatures that you either love or you love differently. But there's other things like JSON files, Hadoop, right, Parquet files, newer formats that we're looking to support as well. So JSON, for instance, is supported in Tableau Desktop. We need a new paradigm for how that works in Maestro because the concept of level of details, which is how we do it in Desktop, slightly different in a data prep world. But other formats like cloud applications, web data connectors, JDBC, all those things we're going to be adding natively in Maestro. Other questions? Yes?
Have you worked on any geospatial data cleaning, like address geocoding?
So address level geocoding. So that's so first, spatial data will get added post V1. So you know how we have a shapefile connector in Tableau Desktop? We're going to add that in here. Again, for some of those special data types, you always think of, wait, what's the right way of doing it in a prep world versus an analysis world? Here I'm on a Mac, and Mac always has a subset of the data sets of Windows. So first is, can I bring in those shapefiles? A. Then can I plug in to map services so I can get address level geocoding, distance calculations, blah, blah, blah. We're adding spatial joins in Tableau. So how do we add spatial joins in Maestro as well? You guys know we're adding spatial joins to Tableau. That's in 2018.1. It's going to be super awesome for any geospatial fans out there. So again, there's a lot of this shared code. The thing that's kind of neat, at least from my standpoint, being an engineer at heart, is this is Tableau. It uses Tableau's Hyper engine. That's why we're able to have the fast interactivity and I can experiment. It uses Tableau's connectors. So it's shared connectors between this and that. So when I add a new connector to Tableau, it automatically shows up here. It uses behind the scenes what we're calling AQL. So you know how there's VizQL? There's an AQL on top of it, which is an analytical query language. So when I pull all these operations, it uses the same code as in Tableau Desktop over here. So as I add, and the reason I share all that is as I add new capabilities across Tableau, Maestro can inherit that as well. Just sometimes you got to do some tweaking because it's a different paradigm shift. All right, apparently I got the cut. I was going 45 minutes. Did I go longer?
No, it's good.
All right, I'm at 45. All right, so that's the beta. We've already talked about the questions. Lots of different kinds of composers out there. And hopefully all of you will be composers too. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, thanks. My name is Adam McCann. So I work for Deloitte for the next 3 days, and then I'm moving on to a new company. But I've been using Tableau for about 8 years, and I run a website called duelingdata.com. All of my material, so some of the things I'm going to go over quick, but all the materials, the how-tos, we're going to get into some machine learning in Tableau. They're all available on my website to download, and then all my workbooks are available to download up there as well, on Tableau Public and on my website. So what I'm going to talk today about is a little off. This is science. Good guess. What I'm going to talk today about is Tableau as a tool to achieve both data art and data science. And the reason this topic has always interested me is because you might be surprised, I was a very nerdy child, but I was always sort of interested in two things. One was art, primarily comic books and comics, and thought long and hard about going to art school actually when I was younger. And I was talked out of it. And then I was always passionate about math because I was horrible and still am really horrible at math because I was sick when we went over my multiplication tables and I was out of school and I still don't know what 7 times 7. And so I had a passion for both because one, I had a natural inclination towards, and the other I was just really bad at. So I wanted to get better at. And for those of you who don't know, that is a graphing calculator. That is what we used to make charts in on. And it is, I'm sorry? And so when I talk about this spectrum of data visualization, I talk about it as both a data art and a science. And so there are really two ends of the spectrum that are, the two groups that are sort of pulling the spectrum. And those folks, I'd say Stephen Few would be on the one end of the spectrum, as well as Edward Tufte, who speaks a lot about the rules of data visualization and when to correctly and aptly visualize some things in certain ways. And then the beauty and art of data visualization, which Giorgia Lupi is not necessarily an evangelist, but she certainly is an illuminary in the field of creating data art. And obviously they have two different goals. In data art, you want to create something that's beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Whereas on the data science side, you generally are talking about dashboards and you're trying to create something that is precise and accurate. And so what I hope today to talk about is creating things in Tableau that range along that spectrum and the value of meeting somewhere in the middle. So I recently did a post where I talked about creating data art, infographics, and dashboards all in Tableau. And so that's going to walk you through today is how I went about creating these three different types of visualizations using the same data set and applying some rules to myself. So I was sort of forced to be stuck within that medium and what were the positives and what were the negatives. Before I do that, I want to talk about people within the community that have inspired me. That's as few after Stephen. But on the data art side, there are generative artists like Anders Hoff, who makes generative art and it's beautiful. Giorgia Lupi, Nadia Brammer, Johnny Walker, Matt Daniels, and then Stephen Few. And they're not all sticking perfectly within where I stuck them on the spectrum. You know, Nadia, I think, has made some of the most beautiful things, and she's also made things that are more business friendly and precise. But to just walk you through, Anders Hoff makes very abstract generative art. It's rule-based art. It is visualizing math, essentially. And this is of the most abstract form of data visualization. It's not necessarily to convey a precise value the way you would in a dashboard, but rather to convey something beautiful. Georgia Lupi, who is, of course, Dear Data fame and is featured in the Modern Museum of Art, and who is incredibly talented graphic designer, makes beautiful data visualizations. And this is from her book of Dear Data. This is a hand-drawn data visualization. And most of her stuff is hand-drawn and meant to convey something beautiful rather than necessarily something precise. Nadia Bremer is my favorite person in data visualization. She is a visual cinnamon. She's a former Deloitter, actually, much like myself. And zing. And she does all of her work in D3. She is incredibly talented. She won the IIB Information is Beautiful Award, newcomer, I think, or hot new star or something. Star newcomer award this past year. But she creates both beautiful visualizations that are informative but really unique. Johnny Walker of Tableau Public fame, a new Tableau employee, creates some of the most well-designed, complex infographics, usually about animals. He loves animals. And his stuff is, if you've ever deconstructed something Johnny Walker has made in Tableau Public, it takes a lot of love, a lot of work. And one of the infographics, because I'm not very good at infographics, so I have a lot of appreciation for what Johnny Walker does. And it's an excellent name for those of you who don't know him. No relation. But building an infographic gave me a great appreciation for how hard it is to do what Johnny does. And now he's a Tableau employee. Matt Daniels of Pudding and Polygraph, and Polygraph. I don't know what's the difference between those two, but they do mostly D3-based visualizations, and they tell long-form stories about the vocabulary of hip-hop or sexism in script, movie scripts and things like that. And it is a fantastic small group that just makes data visualizations and tells stories. And again, they're primarily D3-based. And finally, the man, the myth, the legend, Stephen Few, of course, of many books, and has really written the rules and the principles of data visualization, sort of keying off of a lot of things that William Cleveland and several others have really talked about more historically around why a bar chart is more accurate and more precise based off of human cognition than things like pie charts. And Stephen Few used to work for Tableau, I believe, as an advisor in the early years. Is Francois gone? Say yes, he was. So the goal here today is to talk about Tableau as a tool that ranges across that spectrum. So I'm going to walk you through how to create data art, how to create infographics, and then not just how to create dashboards, because it's relatively easy to create dashboards in Tableau, but to do data science and machine learning in Tableau. So these are some tools that allow you to do these things. I admit this is not the best visualization, and this is my opinion. This is not the opinion of Deloitte or Tableau or Britton Fong. This is Adam McCann's opinion. Sorry, Britton. But when I think, these are the tools that I'm familiar with, and these are the tools that I have used historically. But when I think of the tools that can create both data art, infographics, and dashboards, these are the tools that come to mind. At the top of it, and then the y-axis is how hard it is for Adam. I recognize Nadia can do something in D3 much faster than I could. But in general, if you're a newcomer, I think this represents how hard it is to build in these different types of tools. And so D3, you can obviously create data art. People do it all the time. They create infographics and dashboards. The point of entry in terms of a learning curve is a touch, not a touch, it's higher than for Tableau. Adobe Illustrator, obviously, you can create data art and infographics, but they're static and it can be time consuming. You can do all of this stuff in Microsoft Excel. I have done all of these things in Microsoft Excel, and there's actually an article I was talking to Mike about a Japanese artist who creates data art using Excel. Very time consuming. It's very beautiful what he creates, but it's very time consuming. Very, I imagine to him not painful, but it looks painful. And then Tableau. The last one I'm going to talk about is Data Wrapper, which is very good at long form storytelling. Gregor Asik, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but a formerly of the New York Times and of the jittering gauge, famous jittering gauge visualization, is the chief technology officer at Data Wrapper. So it's an excellent tool in terms of infographics, but I haven't really seen it used for other things. Again, this is my opinion, not others. But what we're going to talk about today is Tableau. So this is actually pulling from some slides I gave, Radi Zakovich, another Zen master, and I gave at the conference this year. But it's talking about how Tableau is not just a charting tool, but a tool for creating really anything you can imagine. So all of you, most of you, I hope, know that these are the default chart types available to you. These are the ones available to you in the Show Me window. But thanks to the good folks in the Tableau community, the ability to create a lot of other chart types, including Sankey diagrams, sunbursts, awesome gauges, gauge charts. Stephen Few loves them. Awesome, are all available to you with either some trickery or some slight modification within Tableau. And so all of these charts are available to you. And so this is actually a visualization I work with Mike on, is a ternary plot. Ternary plots have a very narrow use. It is when you want to show the balance of a relationship on 3 variables. So someone right in the middle here, this is showing NFL players at the combine and how strong they are based on how many times they lifted some weights, I don't know exactly, their body mass index, so their size, and their 40 times, so their speed. And so the closer you are to the center, the better you are at all of those things, or the worse you are at all those things, meaning you're not differentiating one or the other. If you're over here, you're fast, but you're not very strong or big. So like your cornerbacks are here because they're fast, but they're small, and they're not weak. They're stronger than me, of course, but they are weaker than these guys. And then up here, you have your offensive linemen who are slow and strong and big. It's a very narrow use case for why you want to use a ternary plot, but this is something that's actually relatively easy to create in Tableau. And the 538 actually did a great ternary plot around news coverage of the big 3 cable news companies and how they cover different topics differently.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So, actually, I probably picked it up fine, but I was wondering if that was like polar coordinates, and also is it always a ternary, it's a triangle, or is it an n-area plot, is it a square, or whatever?
You can go, it gets harder to read, obviously, but yeah, ternary obviously implies 3, but yeah, it's essentially distance from center means deviation from the normal. Mm-hmm. And so someone who's right here is somewhere right in the middle in terms of they have average strength, size, and speed. So these are outliers in terms of those points relative to others. So you'll get drawn down here if you're fast and strong. You'll get drawn over here if you are fast and big, and you'll get drawn over here if you're big and strong. Yeah. And this is all interactive. Trust me, I can't. This is just a picture, but it is. And then gauge charts. So I created this chart. The first gauge chart I created was how much does Stephen Few hate this chart. This is a more business-friendly chart. This is essentially recreating a bullet chart, which hurts Stephen Few even more. He invented a bullet chart. This is showing a gauge relative to a target or distribution. So this would be the target, and this would be the distribution. This is all creatable, recreatable in Tableau, and available on my website. So this all leads me to say that Tableau is not just a charting tool, but a data-driven drawing tool. And this is not my quote. This comes from Joe Mako via Jonathan Drummey. And for those of you who don't know Joe Mako, if you are reading something on one of the forums, there's a good chance that Joe is the one who wrote it. Joe was a big inspiration to me and a lot of the other Zen masters, particularly early on in our career. So Joe is one who really understands Tableau probably better than, is Francois still here? Probably better than France. No. Is this recorded? I'm not going to Zen master. But so Tableau is a data-driven drawing tool. And so what do I mean by that? It means that all charts are possible in Tableau by following these 3 general steps. Plot your points on your X and Y coordinates, and I'll walk you through how to do that. Connect those points somehow, whether it be through color or through path or through some other attribute that you can add to your shelves, and then format those points to add color or context or design. So this is a GIF of me creating a very useful chart type. So I drag X and Y values into my rows and column shelves. I drag a color value into my color shelf, and then I edit my colors to make it a human color palette, and it creates out of several 100,000 points a recognizable image, which is Van Gogh's Starry Night. just by plotting points onto your X and Y coordinates, formatting those points by color, and then, connecting those points by color, and finally formatting those points so it's a color palette that I borrowed from Merlin Buick, by the way, right there, to make it a recognizable image. So as you hover and click, you're selecting thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of variables. And this was all done by plotting points, using R to capture an image, converting that image into an X and Y coordinate and an R and a G and a B value, so red, green, blue. Transforming those values into R so I can bring it into Tableau, and then bring it into Tableau so I have my X coordinate of where a point was seen, what color that point was, and then formatting it using Merlin's color palette to create Starry Night. So essentially, you can create anything you see by following these rules, by following these steps. You need to use R to do this. The same way the Japanese artists recreated images in art by filling in cells in Microsoft Excel, you could theoretically do the same thing in Tableau, which is super tedious. This took, you saw it didn't take very long. So this is not a very, user-friendly or a business applicable example. So another example that I wanted to create was recreating Van Gogh's self-portrait. So I wanted to create a visualization that achieved that sort of brush stroke effect that you see where the brush stroke is exerting sort of texture as well as color to convey an image. And so I wanted to create a visualization that looks like this. So I generally start with drawing my data visualizations and then using another tool to process my data, and then using Tableau to just render what I've processed. And so this is the visualization I wanted to create. I wanted to show voting patterns for the presidential elections for the last 12 elections or so by state. So every brushstroke was a state. The thickness of that brushstroke was how many people voted or lived in that state, one of those two. And then the angle of the brushstroke was whether they voted very Democratic or very Republican. And then in the center here indicates who won the election. So we're going to walk through how to create this again in Tableau. So again, I created X and Y coordinates. This time it was rather easy. I didn't use R to create my X and Y coordinates. I have an ordinal scale of where the states ranked between 1 and 50, left and right. And then I have another value, a second value indicating how Democrat and how Republican they were. I have it on a diverging palette, so more to the left it's blue, and more to the right it's red or Republican. I then add in the population or the voting size into my size shelf to indicate how many people voted. I then have a dual axis, so I want to break out the axis so you can see a label to indicate who won the election, and I want to format that label so it has both the year of the election and the winner of the election. And then I want to center it so it's in between the lines, so the lines are going left and right, so I make a dual axis. I then synchronize those axes, and then I hide my axes, and then I make it pretty by coloring it. And then I like dark backgrounds. And then when you hover over, you can see states as you hover over, whether they voted very right, West Virginia, or whether they voted very left, DC. Whenever you see a line jutting out that way, that is Washington, DC. It's very thin, very angular line. Yes, sir. No. What I have, you can notice if you go to the interactive version, is it used to be, bouncing back and forth that, some states would be blue and some states were red. You're starting to see more entrenchment, and states tend to vote the same way. My guess is that entrenchment's not getting any better, but I'm not a political scientist. So that's an example of how to create things you see, so to create art essentially in Tableau. And so on the left end of the spectrum, but I want to be able to create all of these things, not just data art, but also infographics and dashboards. And so what I did was I went through an exercise where I wanted to create 3 different visualizations, all using three different mediums, all using the same data set. So this data set I used was National Hurricane Center hurricane data for the last 25 years. Every storm, every point of where the storm was. And I wanted to create data art, which is on the left, an infographic, which told a story in the center, and a dashboard, which allowed you to query and ask questions. And so the first one I created, the easiest one I created, was the data art visualization. And so this is showing every cell or square indicates a year, starting from 25 years ago to this past year. Every line indicates a derivation from the origin point of the hurricane. So most hurricanes, and this is, I'm sorry, these are only Atlantic hurricanes. Most hurricanes flow north and west and then back to the east. So they most curl around like that. So you can see those that did not follow that pattern. The thickness of the line indicates the strength of the hurricane, and then the color, I believe, is the duration of the hurricane. So more orange, the longer, the blue, the shorter. So the nice thing about this is that it's aesthetically pleasing, it's engaging, and it's a unique visualization. The negatives, it's dense, it's a lot of information, it's hard to read, it's hard to decipher patterns, it might be confusing. You might not recognize that this is all the difference from the origin point, but it creates something that is unique and maybe more engaging than a typical dashboard. This is version B of the same exact dashboard. And so this is the size of the circles represent the number of days we experienced an Atlantic hurricane, and the time around the circles, how long the hurricane lasted, and the thickness is the intensity of the hurricane at that point. And then the color represents, I don't remember. What intensity? All right. I don't remember. So this was just another version. I had the data set up here. It was just adding some simple math to modify. So this is all interactive and all built in Tableau. The second thing I built, and what took probably a month and a half, not full time, obviously, I have a job and family, is the infographic. And so I'm not very good at infographics, I don't know, I'm just not. And so I reached out to Johnny Walker, the Tableau person, my good friend, to ask for his advice, and he gave me a ton of great advice. And that's one of the good things about the Tableau public, or the Tableau community in general, is that if you reach out to someone, generally they're pretty helpful, they're pretty responsive. And Johnny was immediately responsive and helped me out. The trick of building an infographic was the layout. And so, because all these pieces have to move and fit together, and you want to tell sort of a linear story that goes from the top to the bottom. The story I wanted to tell was the trend in hurricanes and highlighting Category 4 hurricanes, as well as how devastating hurricanes in the last few years have been, particularly Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey last year, which caused a lot of damage. And so it facilitates a better call to action. It's better at storytelling, in my opinion, because it's generally the purpose of an infographic. The negatives are it's hard to build. I struggle with the layout. It took the longest thing it took me is to keep fitting the pieces in. And Tableau is a difficult tool to build infographics in my opinion, for a variety of reasons. The other thing is it's visually dense and it might be overwhelming. There's a lot of information in here. I tried to use the same screen real estate that I used for all of them, so one isn't better because I had more screen real estate, but one is better because the medium is better, or what I was trying to communicate was better. And the last one I created was a dashboard. This took, a couple hours. This is what Tableau is good at. This is communicating some basic descriptive and exploratory stats about hurricanes, trend over time, the distribution of the wind speed, the distribution of the duration, and all allowing me to drill and see specific hurricanes down here. Tableau is very good at that. It's very easy to build quickly. It's harder to tell a story this way. You could, I guess, incorporate a call to action, but I wanted this to be more of a professional dashboard. And so this is this is an okay dashboard, but Tableau is very good at sort of creating these types of things. And it was easy to create quickly. So going back to our spectrum of art versus science, I want to move more towards how do you do not just data art and infographics and dashboard, but how do you do more complex data science in Tableau? And so I also wrote a post recently about this, and I'm going to update the post with a new example. But this is how to build naive Bayes classifiers in Tableau. So if you want to do predictive modeling or probabilistic classification, generally you're using another tool. But what I'm going to walk you through today is how you can do this all natively in Tableau. When you would use this type of Bayes classification is when you want to predict something. So we've used this for hiring forecasts. What is the probability we are going to hire this individual in our pipeline? You can use this for supply chain. What is the probability this thing will make it through supply chain X to supply chain Y? You could use it for risk. What is the probability of a risky event occurring? Your email spam filters use Bayesian classification to classify something as real email from your friends versus spam from spammers. And so Bayesian classification is used very broadly. It's a very flexible tool or flexible algorithm. So I want to walk through how to create this in Tableau. So generally, when my teams build complex data models or predictive models, this is something of like what we're doing on our clients at our clients. So you have some sort of data warehouse, or you have multiple data warehouses. Just let's say you have one, that'd be nice. Doesn't ever happen, but let's just say you have one perfect data warehouse, the only one you're using. And then you want to either build your model by pushing it into, I tend to use R, my teams tend to use Python, or some other advanced modeling tool. You could also push it into your ETL process. So if you push it into an Alteryx, and then you could do your modeling there, or you can transform your data in Alteryx and then push it into R. And a lot of times you want to write back the results of your model, so you can store it and you can track what it's doing. Or you can just push it into Tableau, visualize the results, and then hopefully that will lead to revisions to your model. That I'm noticing this is wrong, or my model's getting overfitted, or my type 1 error is increasing. And so you go back and sort of re-engage in this process to make model revisions, either back to your warehouse or back to somewhere within your workflow. But this process, what I'm going to propose today, this is the process. And just for naive Bayes classifiers. You pull data from your warehouse into Tableau. You write all of the steps you need to create your classifier in Tableau. You can assess the accuracy and the fidelity of your model, the type 1, type 2 errors in Tableau. And then you can make revisions in Tableau. You could, you lose in that you're not putting it back to the warehouse necessarily, but the benefits are it's exposed to your end users all the same because you're all using the same calculated fields. So that's what I'm going to walk you through today. How many folks have used LOD calcs, level of detail calcs? Okay, so the only thing this uses is LOD calcs, and so there's more hands than I got in my last presentation, which I only got one hand in my last presentation. They asked me, I said, who has used LOD calcs? And one person raised their hand. And it was to ask what an LOD calc is. So I lost most of them, right about here. And so most of this uses LOD, or level of detail calcs. And for those who didn't raise your hand, it is a calculation where you're setting it at a fixed level of aggregation. So there's a few different types of LOD calcs you can do. But the one I'm going to use most of the time here is just fixed. So all the calcs that feed this, and there are several calcs, we're not going to go through all of them, that feed this are based off of LODs. There's a detailed walkthrough of how to do this on my website, as well as the actual workbook that contains the classification model. But this is generally how you do it. Create an outcome variable of what you want to predict, whether it be, in this case, we're going to predict credit card defaults, and that's the final product we're going to show. It's from a Kaggle data set around, it's anonymized data. It's a few 100,000 credit card holders, and you want to predict the probability that this holder will default on payment. And so Kaggle challenge, put the data out there and ask, hey, who can build the most accurate model? The model I built here today, I think, is somewhere in the 80% type 1 error. So it's not the best model, but it certainly can get better. I didn't do much in terms of variable cleanup or anything like that. I'm going to talk a little about that. But this is a pretty strong model, and the goal is to predict what is the probability someone will default on their credit card payment. And then you have information around what gender they are, how old they are, how they defaulted before, what is their balance, what is their last few payments, things like that. So we clean up your input variables. You can actually do null value replacement. So one of the things you generally want to do when you're building a model is handling null values. So you actually do null value replacement using LOD calcs. You can write things like if null, then take the average at this level of aggregation. It's a pretty dumb null value replacement, but it could work. It sometimes works. Then you need to create your conditional probability. This is, for example, say one of my inputs is gender or sex of the individual. So What is the probability they default by sex relative to all customers? You want to create your class prior probability. What's the probability to default relative to all customers? And then your prior probability, which is what is the probability you are a male or female relative to all customers. And then you feed that into your naive-based classifier model to get what is the probability given these input variables, given, let's just say gender is the only thing we use, what is the probability you would default? There's more steps. There's a lot more steps. You then want to multiply all those conditions together. You feed it into your Bayes theorem. You repeat these same steps for, you want to predict both the probability to default versus the probability it won't default. You then want to normalize both those defaults to say, put it on a 0 to 1 scale. And then you want to create a prediction. If the probability to default is higher than the probability it won't default, we will predict default, otherwise predict they won't default. Then you can test to define, to refine and validate your model findings. You can actually calculate type 1 errors. What's the based off of a training or a test set, what is the probability, what is the percentage that matched correctly? What is the percentage that they predicted they default and matched correctly? So you can calculate type 1, type 2 errors, again, all using LOT calcs. You can even build in a recursive loop to say, if this model has a lower type 1 error, use this approach where we're feeding it these 6 variables, else use this one where we're feeding it these 7 variables by looking at the type 1 error and selecting which one has or both the type 1 and type 2 errors. And then you can feed new data into it. That's the nice part about it, is rather than this being a stale model that you have to write locally, push the results into your ETL or wherever, and visualize the results, you could do this on the fly. So as it's being fed new data, you can predict new outcomes. You can update the type 1 and type 2 errors to determine if your model's getting out of whack or overfitted, or if new input variables are being created, which are throwing your model off. And that allows you to update the model dynamically. And then you could still do regular refreshes, which what our team does. If every quarter, every month, or whatever, you want to sort of go back to the drawing board and say, hey, this model's getting out of whack. Let's revise it. Let's try new input variables. Let's do some variable cleanup. But you can do that sort of on a regular cadence. And so this is the final product. I haven't published this yet, so I'm going to publish it tonight. But this uses, it creates all the variables in Tableau. They're all calculated fields. It's being fed the Kaggle data. I didn't modify the Kaggle data at all. And what it's saying is based off of things like their gender, their age, their marital status, their education, and their repayment history, what is the probability this man will default? 91%. And then it dynamically calculates the type 1 error. And then you can enter new variables into it. You can say, hey, I have a new customer. He is a man who is married, who has a graduate degree education, and he does not have a history of repayment issues. What is the probability he will default in this case, X%, and this all updates on the fly. So this will be on my website. The positives, obviously there are some. Yep.
Why were all the little yellow bars at the same time?
Because they're all, so there's 300,000 people in this. Actually, I had to.
So that wasn't enough to show up.
Here, I could, there it is. So these are all the people. Oh, you're not seeing it, right? Just trust me, I'm seeing it. There you go. It's on Tableau Public. So these are all the people, so several 100,000 people. So if you drag down, Tableau's horrible, it's really slow. So yeah, it starts to go in, and then the color changes. I don't remember, I think orange, I don't remember. Oranges will default and blue is their default or something like that. It's on my website. But yeah, and so this is a very simple model, so it's only using 5 input variables. My goal was to get the type 1 and type 2 errors as strong as they could. So you're not going to see a ton of differentiation. The goal ultimately is obviously to marginally improve that score by improving the input variables and saying things like, did they have a repayment history where last month they paid off and then the month before they didn't, and the month, so they have some sort of like pattern of they'll repay on time, they'll default, and they'll repay on time, and they'll default. And so you can pick up sort of nuanced patterns like that. You can just keep improving the model, and it'll reach a marginal gains, but it's certainly something you can do.
That takes them out to make the
exactly. Exactly. So you can start taking variables out. You can do like stepwise regression like you would to you keep working down on the variables that you think are most important, or best improve your type 1 error and type 2 error. So the positives of this approach is it's flexible. This is it's a flexible thing that you can apply to a lot of different business problems, to risk, to fraud, to supply chain, to hiring, to attrition. If you want to say what is the probability someone would leave Deloitte based off a number of factors, just theoretically, just kidding. I love Deloitte. You feed it this information and it predict the probability, low probability people maybe you don't want to worry about, high probability and they're high performers, you might want to focus on these individuals. The process flow, the architecture is very simple, maybe too simple, and it avoids having to procure other tools. And you can interact with the model dynamically. So you can on the fly see as your type 1 and type 2 error changes as you filter down into your data. So if you don't use certain variables, your model will get better, your model accuracy might be better or worse. So if you don't know the gender of someone, a customer, and you're only feeding it 4 of the 5 variables, your accuracy might be worse. The negatives of this, if you're doing this in R or Python, you write summary, parentheses, NB, end parentheses, and it gives you a lot of diagnostic stats of how your model performed. You can't do that in Tableau without doing a lot of algebra, like math that I'm not good at, remember? But you in theory could, it'd be a good deal of work. Other model types, this is only one model type, this is just one hammer, not every nail requires you to use an naive-based classifier. And I haven't, this is fed a few 100,000 rows, it's not a lot of data, so there might be potential performance issues because I think the original version is used 32 LOD calcs. I've compressed that down to, I think, like 16, but it's a lot of calcs, and it depends on how many variables you're feeding your model. But that's a lot of calculated fields, and LODs can be computationally intense on the server side. So to close, I talked about the spectrum of beautiful data visualizations versus scientific visualizations. And obviously the goal here is to create something that is both aesthetically pleasing and precise, but most importantly is insightful. And that is me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There are so many ways to capture. Is there a way to maybe capture less complex image and then overlay data so you're not using the other data? You're really using it.
Yeah. So yes. So the package I use in R is called EBI image, which converts images into vectors and to R and G and V values. So you can create some very simple things if you want to show there's other ways to do this, but one thing you do if you want to show like the floor plan of your office building and then show how someone moves through that floor plan, I don't know. That's a bad example, but you could in theory do that and then render it in Tableau. Probably better would be to embed the background as an image. But the EBI image package allows you to essentially convert any image you see, bring it into Tableau and render it just as you would any visualization. One thing I tried to do was Where's Waldo in Tableau, and I failed, took way too long, it sucked. But I tried to train a model to read Waldo images and automatically find his stupid little head, which I stared at for way too long, every time in the image, and I just couldn't train them. I don't think I have the computational power on my machine, because I did it on this stupid machine to do this. But in theory, you could always find where his image is within your larger picture, and say, okay, the probability of him being here is this versus Cal, which is not involved. Yeah, I've done that on projects where we're doing LODs and determined how much better your performance gets. So again, I haven't, in these examples, I'm always feeding table data, and the data I'm using is small, so I've never really seen performance issues. But yes, so if you do apply context filters or data source filters, you will see significant improvements on your LOD counts because those occur before you actually run your LOD. Theoretically, it's the same. I haven't gotten a scale where I need to get the pointer, but theoretically, it's the same because in the LOD, you're moving it from the denominator from the pointer.
Give us the names of one of your favorite experts.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could help me research on visualizations that get the most attention, the experts opinions that get the most visualization and get accurate.
So there have been studies on what visualizations get the most accurate results. There's been plenty of those, and I'm blanking, but there's been plenty of data. I'm sorry. Yeah, Robert Corsa. Robert Corsa. Do you know? Is it Robert Corsa, John? Corsara has talked about this a lot. Andy Cochran talks about eye movement tracking, about how your eye moves across a dashboard and what is most attentive and what is least. And I think he incorporated some of that into his big book, Dashboard. And then there's more general sort of long-term research about the precision of a bar chart versus the precision of a pie chart. And Stephen Few talks a lot about that. Edward Tufte talks a lot about that. All that's predicated on sort of longer-term research. But
Stuff is mostly important, but not evaluated.
Some of those things some of Tufte and Few's statements are predicated on survey research. Some aren't. Just said that. I'll get the wait chart.
Is there any best practices visualization? I know, especially with a lot of users, Tableau offers so many possibilities, so many colors, so many sizes. Since everything it almost makes visualization.
Yeah. So I have a 10 rules of dashboarding. It's another presentation that I give to our Deloitte employees. But a lot of it's based off of principles in Stephen Few's books, particularly in his dashboard book, where he talks a lot about color usage, layout. So his website, Perceptual Edge, contains a lot of those best practices. But on like color, there's a woman, Maureen Stone. Maureen Stone, who is a brilliant woman who talks a lot about color at Tableau, and I think she actually helped them build their color palette as a consultant. And she talks about the science of how many colors our brain can process, categorical or discrete colors our brain can process before there's really no value add in how we differentiate. And that's where they arrived in their sort of Tableau 20 color palette. After 20, there's sort of a drop off in terms of accuracy. I try to tell folks generally in Tableau 4 to 5 visualizations if it's going to fit into a single screen, which generally it should. But if they're big visualizations, if you're using maps and you want to actually use a map, that should be larger. So that's just a general rule of thumb. There's a lot of general rules, but Stephen Few's book's probably the best in terms of. I just stole it. Any other questions? Yeah.
You built any dynamic infographics that's going to spit out good Section 508 compliant for those that wasn't being visualized?
No. No. I'd be a rich man. I'd be here's five. No, I've never done it. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Was R sufficient to do all of your modeling? Your data modeling? Or was SAS required to?
I know for this, I use nothing but R. But again, I'm not dealing with large scale data.
I was just curious to see if R had really offered all the modeling capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a challenge that I run into that R doesn't have some solution to. Now, some are better in Python or SAS. Some are faster and easier in Python. I don't know about SAS, but I'm just more familiar with R, but I think a more balanced or a more talented person would probably be able to just pick and choose at random. There are certainly things that Python does better. Cool. Thanks, everyone.